Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to a review of Brandon Sanderson's Oathbringer, where we answer the question, is Oathbringer great? And perhaps, is Oathbringer even good? For those of you that may know, you may or may not, I am rereading the Stormlight Archive. This is the third book in that series. I'm rereading these in preparation for the fifth book, Wind and Truth, which comes out in a couple of weeks now, which is scary because I got a whole other book to read, guys. I'm doing this for two reasons. Firstly, because it's been a long time since I read these books. I need to get refreshed before I'm going to read this new one. And second of all, I kind of wanted to revisit them. I've read a lot of books in between reading Brandon Sanderson, reading Stormlight, and now I want to revisit them. I had great opinions of them before rereading them. So I kind of want to revisit, are they true? Are they not true? Are they built up too much, or have they degraded over time? And it's been an interesting journey so far. The first one, Way of Kings, I thought was a great entry to a fantasy series. I thought even though it was long, I thought it felt well paced. The introduction to these characters was succinct but impactful. The plot was good. The tension was there. It just flowed really well for me. I thought it was a great entry to the fantasy series. My hopes were high. However, Words of Radiance, one of my favorite fantasy books when I read it and in subsequent years after, was a disappointment upon a reread. Knowing where the story was going, knowing the climactic moments, a lot of the writing kind of fell flat for me. It felt too long. It felt like it wasn't really going anywhere. And then if you're losing the suspense of what's going to happen to these characters plot-wise, it was just a disappointment overall. Not to say there weren't great moments or good parts about that book. Overall, I was disappointed, which struck me with fear, because if Words of Radiance was my pinnacle, how I pictured in my head was Way of Kings was here, Words of Radiance was the peak, and then Oathbringer and Rhythm of War kind of went slightly downward after that. I thought that if the real peak was lower than I originally thought, surely these books will go into the trash. Hence the reframing of, is it great, but is it even good? However, I think we can safely say that Oathbringer is a good book. However, again, I don't think it's a great book. However, a third time, I think it's better than Words of Radiance upon a reread. And we'll kind of go into the same reasons. It has a lot of the same weaknesses of Words of Radiance, and we'll talk about those. But overall, I think it is a better structured book. And it does follow the same structure of the other Stormlight books, but in terms of jumping perspectives, flashbacks, interludes, that kind of thing, I think overall it works better in this book. I think for the flashback specifically, Way of Kings, I felt it was seamlessly done. Kaladin's flashbacks didn't feel like they were breaking up in the flow, because it was such an interesting event that happened to him that was so relevant to what he was doing right then. He was a slave. He was a bridge runner. How did he get there? His flashbacks directly tell that story, directly tell that conflict. And we even start early in the book before when he's just a slave, right? We want to know how he got to this exact position. And his flashbacks, while some of it flashbacked when he was a childhood, it still led into why he joined the army, why he's this stark, dark, and moody character, then why he became a slave. Felt directly tied into that. Words of Radiance flashback with Shallan's flashback, though, as I said in the last video, she's a character built upon mystery, built upon lies that she even tells others and tells herself. So having flashbacks where she doesn't even reveal the truth that she doesn't say in the present day, so it really just tells us no information, because the reveals about this character happen in the present day when she unlocks her own mind and is like, wait a minute, I killed my own mother? Those reveals happen in the present day. So to me, the question I was asking myself was, why are we having flashbacks then if you're going to still keep it vague and mysterious like she is in the present day? It just felt like a waste of time. However, Dalinar's flashbacks kind of go back to form a little bit. I think they're very well done with this whole plot of him trying to unite the kingdoms, and everyone's very wary. They're like, I don't want to deal with the Blackthorn. Before the Blackthorn was like, okay, he used to be a great warrior, now he's like a peacemaker. Showing us Dalinar in his absolute psychotic prime was fascinating to watch. Obviously, there's some action sequences, there's some battle, some really in-your-face adrenaline action. But I think as a character, seeing the difference between Dalinar now and Dalinar at the start of the flashbacks, they're so completely different characters that kind of what kept me motivated throughout there is how are these the same people? Because one is horrendous war criminal, the other one is everyone's favorite papa, right? I thought that that hook. And it's kind of similar to Kaladin's, where it's he's in a crappy situation. How did he get there from just a little innocent boy? How did this horrible war criminal become the Dalinar we know today was a gap that I was interested to see filled with the flashbacks. So I think in that way it worked a lot better. And also just to jump, we'll keep it on the characters, then we'll move on from there. The other like fascinating part, I will say though, I think Dalinar's modern day stuff, it did kind of drag a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of the pacing. I thought Shallan had a much better, much more interesting character arc in this book than in her book, Words of Radiance, even though that was her flashback book. I really like the aspect of her character where she has like these multiple personas, and it's kind of like schizophrenic, where she's so desperate to hide her true self that she makes up these personas. But it's not just that she flips into different characters like Veil or Radiant. It's the scenes, it happens more towards the end of this book, where like she cannot control which one she is at any given moment, and they're so distinct in their personalities. In this book, so much happens in this book, but in this book, she develops the personalities. They start to take control. She starts to lose control of them. So by the end of the book, there's paragraphs, or there's pages rather, where she's switching between which character she is in every single sentence because she's tired, because she's overwhelmed, or whatever. That is so fascinating to me, and it fits perfectly well with like her character of like hiding truths. So I almost wish that this aspect happened earlier, carried over into her flashback book. I feel like that tied so much more interestingly. But just her idea of like having different personas, being three characters in one, it was by far the most interesting part, I think, of the entire book, dare I say, is her escapades that she gets up to. Actually, she has this persona. She works with her men undercover as a different person, like the revealing of herself to those people, her fighting with Pattern when Pattern can like tell when she's lying even to herself. It's very fantastically done character work. And again, I think it's just a shame that this doesn't happen in her own book, that her reveals, her character arc in Words of Radiance just kind of really led to like a prelude to the real interesting stuff. I think was a strange choice, but I thought that was very well done. Kaladin, I feel like in this book, it's definitely a weak book from him. I think, and we're going to start to trend into the things that I didn't think worked as well. It's similar to Words of Radiance, where there's a lot of periods in this book where it feels like characters are stagnant. There's nothing really pushing them forward. They're kind of stuck into a status quo. For Words of Radiance, that was when, or that was the beginning of the book, right? That was when Kaladin joined Dalinar's guard, and they don't really have any external goals. They're just kind of protecting him every day, and Dalinar's kind of just like on the Shattered Plains. For this book, it more happens in the latter half. Everything after the spoiler alert, if you're not trying to get spoiler of the book, I'm going to talk for 20 minutes about Elkahar's death and onward. That's where things started to fall apart for me. I think everything, I guess I'm going back to the positives. Going from there up into Elkahar's death, they're trying to defeat the Unmade there. They're trying to save Elkahar's wife, the queen. She finds out she's corrupted. Moash is there. He stabs the king. All great stuff. I think everything up to that book is extraordinarily strong. The flashbacks are strong. Shallan becoming these characters is strong. The action is good. The mystery of the Unmade is good. The book should have ended there. The book should have ended at page 850 or whatever it was. But the fact that we continued on for 450 pages, that's where things started to lose me a little bit. Once they get into the Spren world, I forget what they called it, the spiritual realm, I don't know. The Spren world is what it is. Then they're just traveling vaguely, and then Dalinar still through the whole book is just like vaguely trying to unite people, but then he's in this period where like he remembers his past. That big reveal already happened in line with Elkahar's death. Like that was a really intense moment, and it's kind of just like, I'm sad again. I'm sad. And going back to Kaladin, what I thought was really disappointing with him was obviously he's a character who struggles a lot with like his responsibility, right? If he'd be a horrible Spider-Man because he can't handle the responsibility of it. Or is he the greatest Spider-Man perhaps because Spider-Man does struggle with the same thing? Maybe he is Spider-Man. That's not the point. However, obviously this whole thing is like, oh, my responsibility to protect people, I can't do it. That's why I started thinking of the word responsibility, and I started thinking about Spider-Man. That's why I brought that up, okay? You don't need to ask questions. But at Elkahar's death, Kaladin enters back into his like, I'm a loser, man. I'm such a loser. And Sill's given like, you're the best. Keep it up, buddy. And then obviously the climax, the bait and switch is that you think he's going to level up again like he did at the end of Words of Radiance, but he doesn't. so basically it was just like a 400-page stretch of him just moping for a very strange reason. Like he thought that he should have saved someone that died again. It's like, didn't we do this like all the way back in book 1? Like, you can't just enter a 400-page depression every time somebody dies. Or if you're gonna do it, Brandon, please do not write about it. It's so uninteresting to me. So it just led through them trudging through this vague plane of random balls and marbles that are actually things in the real world. They're traveling there, but they don't really know where they're going. They don't know this world, so they're just on random boats, meeting random Spren people, and they're hoping they can find it, but they don't really know what they're doing. They don't really know why they're going back. And then Dalinar's like starts drinking again because he remembers these things. And I understand character-wise why they get to this place. I just think that period of the book, that 350-page stretch, was very, very tough to get through. I think the character work and everything up to the Alcahar's death, and that point, the end of Alcahar being taken over, that would have been a perfect ending to the book. And obviously you'd have to trim Dalinar's thing to that maybe like, because all right, I don't know how you would do that again, because it's a similar thing that I said the last book, right? There's nothing that stands out to like, you should cut this down. However, this book did need to be cut down. And I'm not the editor, I'm not the smart story guy, right? But this book should not have been 1,300 pages long. Because it reaches the point at the end when there's I don't know how long it was, 80, 100-page battle sequence at the end of the book. It was just I was just so done with it by then. I was so done with it. We had reached, like, and the thing about the Alcar siege or whatever, the battle scenes were snippy, they were quick, they were filled with character moments. Elcar's gonna swear the oaths, he's gonna become a Radiant, oh, he dies, blah, 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 tragic. That was all well-paced. The battle at the end, it was like an anime where you just cut to different characters having a one-on-one fight and they have their one-liner moment. Woohoo! They did the thing. They said the line. Cut. Next person does the same thing. And the emotional climax of Dalinar and like the whole concept of Odium being like, it was me all along. I corrupted you this whole time. Give your pain to me. He's like, you cannot have my pain. Okay, that's the moment that the scene could be about. It doesn't need to be Kaladin getting his revenge against a evil version of Amaram. That was a waste of time. It doesn't need to be about filler characters like, in this book, Lift, who literally every time she comes on screen, I know I'm just about to read entirely plot and not character or theme relevant fluff of her stealing a gem, skating around, making quips. And someone said this in the comments of my last video, where Sanderson is so plot focused that if you know where it's going, if you know the end point, it all kind of just falls apart because it's all just so plot focused. And everything lifted in that final battle was just so plot focused because I know that she gets the gem. So when I'm reading like extended pages of him like or her like she slides under a building, it's like I don't care. It's not interesting to me. And I just struggled with it, that ending battle especially. And I think it's because I was partially exhausted with the book because of that period of drudgery of 400 pages. But it's just like, yeah, Adelin's fighting the rock monster. Okay, but he's so good with the sword. Then the sword starts talking to him. Oh, yes, interesting. So is he going to bring us a dead Spren back to life? Yes, let's talk about that. Oh, no, let's cut back to Lift, and she's ice skating around. Got any food, anybody? It's just, I don't know, man. I do think it's a better book than Words of Radiance. I think the climax is better just because of the character moment for Dalinar. I think the aspect of Renarin and his idea that he could see this future the whole time, he was corrupted by Odium, but then it was broken. Why did that have to all be a reveal? Not just a reveal that he sees the future and that he's corrupted by Odium, but the reveal that he was wrong the whole time. It feels like sometimes Sanderson focuses on the wrong things. I know people love Teft. His little interludes, though, of like, I'm a drug addict, I'm a loser. I predict those I hate, even if I hate myself. At the point that was finally revealed, I'm like, okay, bro. Okay, join the fight, why don't you? Start flying around like the rest of them. I don't care. And that's a bit of an overreaction. But I think that, like, we spent so much time talking about things that just lead to like a basically equivalent of like a car explosion, right? And it's just not satisfying to me. It's really not. And I'm thinking I'm going to find that's a trend that I'm just not, I'm straight up not having a good time with these plot focused battles. And maybe I just don't like action scenes, or maybe I don't like action scenes that don't serve a purpose other than like watching our characters like beat the crap out of goons, right? Because that's what it feels like. That's what that battle felt like. Because obviously, it's not to say that like nothing plot important happened. I think Taravangian, perhaps. I think his whole affliction was very interesting. I thought that played in well with the theme of like Dalinar's character, like the Night Watcher, having another character there with a very specific boon and curse was interesting. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. There's a lot of good stuff. It just shouldn't be 1,300 pages long. It really just shouldn't, guys. And it makes me weary, and I hate to say this, guys. I really hate to say this. It made me not want to read Rhythm of War, how much I thoroughly did not enjoy the last 350 pages. Just knowing I got to do it all again, but I think this one's like 1,400 pages. I'm like, dude, what a snooze. Because I remember more of Rhythm of War, and I know it's all just plot nonsense. It's Kaladin, Die Hard in the tower, which at the time I read it the first time, I'm like, this is sick. This is sick. But if I remember what I remember, not much else goes on in that book. A very few plot events, which unfortunately I remember, so it won't be a surprise. I don't know. I don't know if I was an author, I don't know how to rewrite this book, because I don't think it needs rewritten. I just think it needs maybe tightened, restructured perhaps, because the emotional payoffs don't pay off twice. All right, and I ain't afraid to say it, brother. Another thing I found interesting, though, I think the Heralds, very interesting characters. The fact that these like gods of this world, these absolute legends of humanity, have all lost themselves in one way or another. And I think Sazeth should have been throughout the whole book too. Not necessarily the things that he was doing by himself, but the things that he was doing with Nail. Nail's a fascinating character. And I think spending more time with him, talking to Sazeth, having them both come their character arcs together. I liked where Sazeth decides to take an oath to befriend Dalinar. That was a positive, right? And there are things to focus on. I think sometimes I get too wrapped up in the anger, in the odium, perhaps. There are a lot of good things here. So overall, let's just go over the positives so we live on a happy note, so we feel better about ourselves. Dalinar's flashbacks, very interesting. Dalinar's arc in this story, being able to accept the pain, accept that I'm just a straight up bad dude, pretty cool. However, he really committed a horrendous act, guys, and I feel like it is hard to overlook that like he did burn his final heroic moment is admitting that like I voluntarily murdered thousands of people, women and children, burned them alive, in fact. And you know what? It was me. It wasn't the evil god. It was straight up me because I liked it. And I wanted to do it. That's interesting to me. It's interesting because like that's not a cool thing to do, but he admits it. It was cool though. Summons the perpendicularity or whatever and becomes Honor himself. Very cool. What happened cool with Kaladin? Kaladin, he's found attractive by Shallan's character Vale. I thought that was good for him. Good for him. What a flop of a book from Kaladin. I'm not gonna lie. I'm getting tired of his butt. He's so moody. Shallan, fantastic work. Schizophrenia, I love it. Adolin, befriending his sword, being so respectful, being so kind to his sword that perhaps she'll come back to life. She starts talking to him. That's very interesting. The Herald's very interesting. The Unmade are an interesting concept. And that's about it, guys. Everything else, it's classic Stormlight for you, for better or for worse. And like I said, I'm just hesitant to go into another book because, I'm going to be so exhausted by the time Wind and Truth comes out that but it'll be fresh then. So let's end the rambling. Let's shut up, please. Gosh. But we're going to read Rhythm of War. We're going to do it anyway. And then we're going to be excited for Wind and Truth because we don't know what's going to happen. And it's going to be the end of a Stormlight era. And we're excited for it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to see more like in the future. And as always, thank you for sticking around.